Let me introduce our speaker. It gives me great pleasure to actually welcome and introduce Atul, whom I met several years ago in Delhi. Atul is an artist who has explored the physical and historical and political significance of water in the urban environment of New Delhi through artworks that incorporate sculpture, painting, installation, video, photography, and performance. And this fall, he is also South Asia Programs artist in residence. We wish he could have been here physically, okay? But this is the next best thing, I guess. So he's our virtual artist in residence. His recent solo shows include Anhedonic Dehiscence, which was at the Vadera Art Gallery in New Delhi in 2018. You Always Step into the Same River, which was at the Sepia Eye in New York in 2015. And Ye Kya Kuch Aur, which was in the Vadera Art Gallery in New Delhi in 2014. He was also the Mellon Artist Research Africa Fellow at the Wits University in Johannesburg in 2018, with the project The Excavated Distance of Gold, examining acid mine drainage at the gold mines. Recent group exhibitions have brought his work to PhotoFest Biennale Houston in 2016 and 2018, the Pompidou Center, the IVM Institute of Modern Art in Valencia, and the Devi Art Foundation in New Delhi. Important books on his talks are Yamuna Walk and the monograph, You Always Step into the Same River. And just to kind of, in a sense, think about his work in relation to the worsening, issues of environment and ecology that are increasingly becoming more urgent. I think Atul's work acquires more and more significance the more we think about it and the more we dwell in it. So very happy to have Atul here. Welcome.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Iftikhar, and thank you, Daniel and Gloria. I thank the Cornell University and the South Asia program for organizing this, and thank you everyone else who is here. And it's my pleasure to talk to all of you today. Let me share the screen. Yeah. And I think we are good. Okay, the talk, I'll be doing two talks here at Cornell, and as part of the virtual artist in residence. I would have loved to be here in person, but there are other things going on in the world at the moment, which has stopped us from not only traveling but also touching. And one of my texts for a work was, have you ever touched the Yamuna? The Yamuna is the river in Delhi. Have you ever seen the Yamuna? And recently on the news, I had come across something in which there's a woman who said, I haven't touched a human being in the last 6 months. So I think the physical, the material will definitely be back with a bang whenever we get just a little chance. Yeah, and I'll just start with my talk. Thank you, everyone. The title, You Always Step into the Same River, takes off from Heraclitus, who says, no man ever steps into the same river twice, for neither it is the same river and nor is it the same man. But I emphasize that you always step into the same river. My work is an attempt to understand water, how I perceive it, feel it, eat it, drink it, wash in it, bathe in it, swim, wade, or sink, or will drown in it. How I drench, soak, douse, moisten, quench, dilute, dampen, cleanse, or purify. How I excrete tears, sweat, or urine. How it falls, drops, floods, inundates, levels, buoys, lashes, gushes, swells, and ripples. How it exists as fog, mist, cloud, steam, snow, sleet, rain, or puddle. How it contains or is contained. How it is dammed, or bottled. Awake to the Yamuna. A boat hangs halfway between where it should be and where it might go, suspended in midair, a moment before it may touch the water, the river, or not. It could also be a moment the boat ends its journeying and is liberated from its function, delivered, a moment of dilemma, a wooden boat midair awaiting its release, but which way? What happens when the boat touches the river? What happens when the river touches the city? But does the city even want to touch its river? The boat, as you see, the work sprang out of my idiotic whim to get a boat made in Delhi, and the exploratory journey resulting in expansive ethnographic exploration of traditional boat-making techniques of Upper Ganges Basin, staging singular and personal experience. The shared key characteristic to which is that it has an immediate and instinctive reaction with the landscape to which water is central. Research executed between 2012 and 13 for the Heritage Transport Museum, a public-private enterprise just outside Delhi. The installation at the museum is called Wake, and the curator for the show was Priya Paul. This year-and-a-half project got me to make a boat on the banks of the river. Awake, the meaning of awake, or aftermath of a death, is a vigil is held along with the body of someone who has died, sometimes accompanied with ritual observances. The Yamuna is, if not the most polluted rivers of the world, a river from which the city is totally disconnected. Yamuna is the river that goes through Delhi. You can perhaps only see the river through 5 or now 6 flyovers and bridges that cross the river. That too through meshed barricades, like caged inhabitants looking onto an apparent open riverscape. Almost all the water that comes to Delhi is blocked at Wazirabad Barrage, just inside the northern border of the city, and is taken out to feed the greedy city along with another millions of cusecs from the Ganges Canal. The curator, agreeing to my whim and trusting me, in another of my attempts to immerse myself into navigating unfamiliar terrain, another attempt at incorporating the city through the trope of water, I started looking for boat makers along the ghats of the Yamuna. Delhi has 25 inaccessible ghats, steps to the river, which are hidden from the public view by a wall to protect the rest of Delhi getting inundated as it did in the Great Flood of 1978. And that is when this wall came up at the northern part of Delhi near the old Loha Pul, or the iron bridge, which was built by the British. No one goes to the river just to sit or to be by it, except the homeless and the small farmers, mostly Muslim. And as the land belongs to the Chauhans and the Gujars, settled nomads who don't farm but are essentially cow and buffalo herders. The Gujars rent out the small tracts of flood basin land, technically still belonging to the village. These urban farmers, working with the contaminated river water, produce contaminated vegetables, which again feeds the urban slums, which line the river and the drains. The only access to the river today, surprisingly, is an access of death. Because I constantly get phone calls, well, where can we access the river, where can we see the river, etc. And then you have to tell them to kind of actually go past the cremation ground, the New Gambod Ghat or Kutsia Ghat, where the ashes of the cremated are immersed into the still stinking waters, polluted waters. The Muslim Christian graveyards are also being within a kilometer of the site, but the riverbank is where the cremation ground is situated. Mythically, the Yamuna is the sister of Yama, according to, right? Yama being the goddess of god of death, and was supposed to have kept The river was supposed to have kept Yama away if one would bathe in her waters. But today, I think she contemplates her own death, or maybe she is dead already. After looking around within the geographical confines of the territory of Delhi, I found a boat repairman who was repairing a small boat on Ghat 21. Most boats along the Yamuna belong to the flood department and hence are factory made of aluminium or fiber. All other boats of the Ghats are made from scrap metal and eucalyptus planks, and so the boat being repaired, and so was the boat that was being repaired. I asked the repairman where he came from, and he said Garganga or Garmukteshwar, the closest spot on the Ganges from Delhi, just about 100 kilometers away in UP, which is Uttar Pradesh, which is the neighboring state. So next week, we're wanting to get a boat made and to engaging with the boat making of the Upper Ganges Basin, I went to Garganga and found Naresh, the repairman, repairing a boat, and asked him if he had ever built one. He said, yes, 3 years ago in Ahar. And I said, I would like to see it. He said, give me my daily wages and I'll take you there. So he jumped in with me and off we went downstream to Ahar. Ahar, which is also a Gupta period archaeological site, nestled between mounds and the river Ganga, with a reserve forest at the river bank. Going through the reserve forest of Sal and Arjun trees, we came to a long sandy beach on the Ganges. And there was his boat in all its magnificence. We can take 5 buffaloes across it. And what he said in Hindi, and those of you who know Hindi, he said, "Isme 5 dangar chale jate hain." Dangar being the slang used for cattle and also people who are stupid. So it's right. Right. He initially agreed to work with me on the project to build a traditional Upper Ganges Basin boat on the Yamuna in Delhi, but then admitted he didn't know how. His brother did. So we went. So when contacted, refused to have anything to do with boat making anymore. It's not viable, he said from his grocery shop. You need only one boat, and what do I do after? I would lose all my clients and business at the grocery store. No one wants boats anymore. Why don't you use the road? Right? I had wanted to work with the boat design and craft of the Upper Ganges Basin, as I felt that the Kerala boats, the Kolkata and the Varanasi boat, along with traditional boats of Tamil Nadu and Gujarat, were in the people's imaginations, but not the boats of the Upper Ganges Basin. When I had shown pictures of this boat, a Pattaya Nav, a boat built with planks, as you can guess, you can see from the image, right? A Pattaya Nav, they had never seen anything like it. And even the boatmen in Varanasi and in Patna, where I was actually doing my research. I finally found a family of boat makers in the upper village Dhani, on the banks of the river Rapti, northwest of Gorakhpur, from the father Subhash, the son Ram Bhuvan, and the maternal uncle, who was just called Mamaji, came to Delhi to work with me on this boat on the banks of the most polluted river of the world, Yamuna. We were together for almost 2 months, sourcing special shisham wood, special long 12, 15, and 18-inch square nails, which was sourced from the blacksmiths in Dhani. The boat was built without using any synthetic waterproofing. They used tree resin from the dhak tree, and the crushed roots of this tree were filled into the crevices of the wood, and the moment it hit water, it would kind of expand and the boat would become waterproof. Subhash had dropped out of school, and so had his son Ram Bhuvan, but Subhash had extremely accurate in calculation of the amount of wood, sizes, thickness needed. I was really amazed at all the calculations he did for setting the balance, angles, and curves of the boat, which was 35 feet long and 10 feet wide. Halfway along, I asked him to make an intervention. I wanted an extra rudder. And he said, no, I had wanted a rudder on each side of the boat. The boat would have 2 rudders on each side. They were horrified. How can you make a boat with 2 backsides? Right? How can you have this? I convinced them somehow that I would always take one off, and that it was actually going to the museum to become a part of an artwork. But then they said, well, this is not what you asked us to do. We are going to make you a real boat, and that's what we want. So I said, at least you can make the provision of providing the rudder on the other side. So they finally agreed to my another idiotic whim, and so we went ahead with making extra rudder. The museum had wanted a boat to be taken the museum had wanted a boat to be taken directly for display to be installed at the museum as an object, untouched by life and water. The boat makers and I insisted that the boat be taken to water, to the Yamuna. This is before it is taken to the museum, for the sake of its well-being, for the sake of the boat makers and the craft's well-being. And the idea from the beginning had been to make a real boat. This took some convincing at the museum, but they finally agreed. So after prayers to the four gods, local village goddess, the whirlpool god, the river goddess, and Vishwakarma, the god of tools and labor, hand-printing the boat's edge with a mixture of rice paste and water, which had to be done by a woman, and in this case, Sushila, my Christian workmate, who eagerly joined in at this point to leave a mark on the boat was finally taken to the river. Reaching the spot where I immersed myself into the river for a work called I Was Not Waving But Drowning. And this is what I continuously do with my work, is revisit sites over a number of years. And the site where we immersed, where we put the boat to water, was also the site where I also executed the work I Was Not Waving But Drowning. And also, it was also became a part of the work which is called Yamuna Walk, which is a book published by University of Washington, Seattle, and CPI, New York. And Subhash, when we reached the water, Subhash, the boat maker, Jamuna ji is not flowing. The river is not flowing. The river is not flowing. He started shouting. But then he immediately understood why I wanted two rudders on the boat, one on each side. Just like the river Yamuna did not flow across the Wazirabad barrage, and the moment the water comes to the barrage, the water would kind of circulate. So if you have a boat with two rudders, all that it will do is actually go in circles, just like the water, just like the Yamuna at Wazirabad barrage. We christened the boat Yamini, night as in very dark. Yamuna is also a dark river, and the god Krishna is also a dark god who worships on the river further down in Mathura. For more ceremonies on the bank necessary for the long life of the boat and the boatmen while on water, Yamini was finally lowered to the still dark waters of Yamuna at Wazirabad. We all went round in circles in the still waters of Wazirabad in a new boat that was quite a spectacle for the local farmers and villages, as none had even in their memories seen such a crafted new boat on the river. This work was called Deliverance. This is the boat with two rudders, if you can see. And you can also see the hand prints with the rice paste. This is Swash. I should just go through this very quickly. This is Mamaji. And this is Ram Bhuvan. And this is the making of the boat. And all traditional, this is, and quite a huge boat. And the nails, almost like staples, they went through the thing, and then praying to the boat. These are the nails. And these are the roots that were put into the crevices, and these are working with it. The nails again, the praying, and then this is, you can see the liquor bottle in the foreground and the praying to the four gods. And I don't think there can be any god can be pleased without liquor, even though some people may not like me saying this, but anyway. And this is the rice paste. And then we took it to the river bank. This is Ram Bhuvan actually tying the rudder. This is Mamaji with the second rudder. And here we are on the boat at the Yamuna at Wazirabad and Jagatpur village. And this is the boat with the two rudders. Then the boat was taken to the Heritage Transport Museum, and there were other interventions with it through stainless steel and mirrors on the beams. It's actually on the first floor, and the cafe and reception are underneath it. So it's kind of conceptually an underwater cafe. And if you come to Delhi, you should all go visit Manesar. It's at the Heritage Transport Museum just off Manesar, just after Gurgaon, another about 30 kilometers from Gurgaon. And this is the underneath. You can look at the nail work, and there were images on the waves, transparent photographic, which kind of added to the reflections that were kind of simulated through mirrors and stainless steel, polished stainless steel. And obviously images of people praying to the river. I just show you the image. This is how it looks like. The canopy was added later. Later you can see the two rudders and the canopy, and this is how it was in the morning. The village was very interesting, and this is the village when I visited the thing, because it becomes extremely important to kind of show this here as part of research, because it was important. This was the only village we did not have any electricity at the time, and these tractors were used to kind of charge the cell phone. This is the father of Subhash, who was telling me how to do it. Interestingly, the father was told me that he had made a boat on the Indus, and he actually taken it down in the Indus, right down to his mouth, to the Arabian Sea when he was young. I think maybe 17, 18 years old. That must be pre-partition. But even though he doesn't look that old, but one had to believe him, he must have been part of some expedition on the side. This is how it is. But then, as you will see soon, there are a lot of embankments, and this is the new bridge that they have. And for them too, with the pontoon in the foreground, what is being used, if you see the pontoons, these are used earlier for the bridge, but now they actually have a concrete bridge. So boat making isn't viable anymore. It is a dying craft, and it is used for sand mining, as you see in the background. This is the work that I mentioned earlier. I was not waving, but drowning. The title comes from Stevie Smith's poem by the same name. And here I immerse myself into the river and at Jagarpur at Wazirabad Barrage, which is the border between the rural area of Delhi and the urban area. And this is also where most of the water from the Yamuna is taken out for consumption for the city. And I immerse myself. This is a 2005 work. This is also work with which I started using photography, digital photography, and the performative came into my work. I shall just go through it. A set of 14 images, and this is in the collection at the Harvard Art Museums, and it was shown. This is all 14 images together, and here it is displayed at the Harvard Art Museum at the time, the Sackler, and it was part of a talk that I also gave there at the time. Listener from West Heavens. This was a project which was a part of an India-China project curated by Chaitanya Sambrani and Johnson Chang. And it addressed my ongoing concern with water and its cultural meanings. My practice has involved an investigation into values associated with water in all its forms, as drink, as an irrigation, rivers, canals, reservoirs, an object of value and a precious resource to be controlled and administered, and as a carrier of refuse. In a series of performances, I assumed the role of a traveler because in our knowledge, we have these travelers from China, but I doubt if there were any travelers from India and from the whole South Asia who traveled elsewhere and who are known as travelers. Obviously, there must have been travelers or seafarers who went to Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Malaysia, but somehow the names are not within public memory. But the Chinese travelers, Yun San, and others are definitely in memory and remain there. So I assume this Indian traveler who was traveling back from West Heavens, because West Heavens is what is known as India, because the Buddha has been born within India, but obviously now Nepal. Right, but so the spectacular growth of Shanghai conceals a buried history. Many streams, lakes, and canals that once constituted a waterside economy, almost like Venice, might still be audible below the concrete. Vestiges of the past, haunting pursuit of hyper-modernity, are perhaps discernible to the ears of travelers from afar. I subtitled the backlit images. These are all backlit with modified text from Deng Chang's Wild Swans, Three Daughters of China, and Mao's Red Book, which recall slogans from the Cultural Revolution. I modified these slogans to appear as consumerist exhortations, and some of these realignments, especially those that mentioned communist construction and red flag, were refused an exhibition permit. So this one, which says two consumers sandwiching a black, was originally two reds sandwiching a black. Reds obviously hinting to the party people or who believed in the party, and someone, a black, is person who did not conform. And in today's context, it would be interesting and worldwide context of what black means, that black in China would mean somebody who does not conform. So it is very interesting in today's terms. I will not go into that, but it's quite interesting what the connotations and the metaphors that made is. So two reds sandwiching a black, but now it is two consumers sandwiching a black. I am also listening to water as a repository of history, meaning, and myth outside one of the oldest schools from the 1920s in Shanghai. You are being protected, but I changed it to, this is what Mao said, you've been protected to consume. And I was almost hit in the face by this woman who did not want to change her path because we were filming or shooting. And this is what happened as part of the thing, because doing the stupid thing of listening to water and me being a very recognizable foreigner, and obviously it meant I had state sanction, which we did because we were invited by the China Art Academy. So having state sanction and doing this public performative project actually pushed the public away from me, even though I had wanted to do this work in Chinese and I wanted to do it with them. But this didn't happen this way because everybody thought I had state sanction. But again, it was listening to water as repository, history, meaning, and myth. And the first time we did it, this was 2010. It was the year of the world. It was the year of the World Expo. And then we went to a location. Shanghai has 3 ring roads, and we located 42 locations named after water, like certain harbors, river view, canal or river harbors, boat harbors, and bridge over canals. And we wanted to shoot there. The first time we went to shoot, the apartment complex wasn't there. I had a Chinese intern, and we were not allowed to shoot. And the police came in and said, "Thank you, but please delete." I said, "Why are they asking?" They said, "No, but they have the Chinese army." I said, "Where is the Chinese army?" There were 4 people exercising on the parking lot, which was originally an apartment complex. So for the apartment complex was torn down to make a parking lot. And the parking lot had 4 guards who they said were the army, and we could not photograph it. But then obviously, just like in South Asia, certain phone calls went around, and then I was allowed, but then obviously it meant that I had state sanction, which I did, but I wasn't really into the public, even though I had wanted to be down on the ground with the public and into different locations, even though I did go to a lot of locations. I did all the 42 locations, but this became a work with 12 backlit boxes. I'll just show you the image later. Father is close, mother is close, but neither is as close as a Gucci. The original would have been as Chairman Mao. This is outside the custom house in Shanghai. Thought reform through suffering was changed to thought reform through consumption. Consume first and the construction will take care of itself. The original was in Mao's Red Book. destroy first and construction will take care of itself. This was obviously censored. And I exhibited this work as just the red inverted commas without the image, because I didn't want to inconvenience the other artists in the show. Otherwise, the whole show would have been brought down. Wave the consumer flag to fight the red flag. The original, this is from Zhang Chang's book. Wave the red flag to fight the red flag. Even if you didn't believe in the red flag, you should have to put it outside your window. Li Feng is eating at McDonald's today. Li Feng was a fictitious character that Mao invented and said Li Feng is helping old people cross the road today, so everybody will do that. Li Feng is cleaning the roads today. Li Feng is helping younger children go to school today, so everybody would follow Li Feng. This is, and this site where I'm listening again to the histories of Shanghai through water, is the site where the decision to do the long march was taken. This building remains as is. And those of you who can read it would know, and those of you who've been to Shanghai would know this place. This is where the decision was taken to go on the long march. So Li Feng is eating at McDonald's today. You are going through a test, and consuming will make you a better communist. This was my first interaction with China. I had never been to China before. And India has a very romantic view, or the Indian left actually have a very romantic view of China and of the Soviet Union. And there's a history of the Indian left actually supporting people or regimes elsewhere, even though they have been vocal about not supporting certain dissidents, or the regimes who have jailed certain dissidents. But we have a very romantic notion with communism in India, which all of you, I will not go into that, but anyway, you are going through a test, but suffering, not suffering, but consuming will make you a better communist. That was also censored. Employed to consume, but under control of surveillance. Consumption has to extend to cousins 9 times removed. This is from Zhang Chang's book. I changed it from execution has to extend to cousin 9 times removed. So if you were thought to be on the wrong side of the party, then not only you, but your cousins would also be executed during the Cultural Revolution. And these are one of the sites of this thing. And Mao, as everybody knew, was against reading. So the original was the less you consume, the more stupid you become. The original was the less, and the more you read, the stupid you become. And there's a history of burning libraries in China during the Cultural Revolution. This is how the work was exhibited. And right in front, you have the black light box with 2 red inverted commas, just as an indicator to what was censored. I had really wanted to do this work in Chinese, the Chinese text, but the history of India-China mistrust is so much that when I got them translated, and I had to send it to them for them to kind of okay all the text, but they made certain changes, and sometimes they're just dashes and lines, and I could not tell what meaning was changed. So I had to choose English. And this was, curatorially, it was a very interesting project, because at the Chaitanya Samrani in his curatorial notes said, taking off on each other's cultures with the least possible reference to the West. And it was a wonderful project, and we had a very good exchange, and they have a wonderful publication from West Heavens, lot of text and images. But unfortunately, this show never came to India. I shall, and this is another view of the image, and then I shall come to another work of mine, which is called What Will Be My Defeat? This, just like a lot of other works, which I kind of infuse mythology and kind of wanting to address recent and current issues through the trope of mythology, I took off from an episode in the Mahabharata, the Indian epic, which is bigger than the Iliad and the Odyssey combined, in which the Pandavas, who are the young princes, 5 princes, in their last year of exile are thirsty and reach a body of water, which stops them with the question, stops them and says, answer my question before you drink. The four younger princes, being younger princes, not heeding the voice, drink and die. The eldest prince, Yudhishthira, to be king, says, examine me. Now, why should the author, in this case, Vyas, Ved Vyas, or Krishnadevarayan Vyas, want the questions to come from a body of water? Why should the water examine the king? What does this signify? So I take, see, the original questions are 54. I take some of them from the Peter Brooks version of the Mahabharata, which was never shown in India because I think the government at the time objected to Bhima being an African American and some of the other caste being Japanese and Chinese and not of Aryan descent, so-called. So this play never came to India, even though it took 10 years of research in India. And Jean-Claude Carrier's script of it has 15 questions for which they are very interesting questions. I reformulated them for as if the river or any river in the world would ask today. The original questions being, the water body or the water asked them, what is quicker than the wind? Yudhishthira says, thought. What can cover the earth? He says, darkness. Who are more numerous, the living or the dead? The living, because the dead are no longer. Give me an example of space. He says, my two hands as one. Give me an example of grief. He says, ignorance. Of poison. He says, desire. Give me an example of defeat. He says, victory. Which animal is the slyest? The one that man has not known yet. Which came first, day or night? He says, day, but by only a day. What is the cause of the world? He says, love. What is your opposite? He says, myself. What is madness? A forgotten way. Why do men revolt? He says, to find beauty either in life or in death. What for each of us is inevitable? And Yudhishthira says, happiness. And what is the greatest marvel? He said, each day death strikes and we live as though we are immortal. This was a public art project in Hamburg on the river Yamuna Elbe project, in which two rivers, two cities. I was the only artist who was chosen to actually execute the work in two cities. These are the locations that were chosen on the Hamburg. Hamburg is almost on the mouth of the river Elbe. And these are the locations in the market that we were chosen. And this was the proposal that was given. And as so it happens to most public art projects, there are a lot of ifs and buts, and the space that you think is public is never really public. And the interventions in public spaces was not allowed as proposed in these images, but we finally exhibited the works on a barge floating outside Hafen city, which is the most upmarket space with offices and flats. And every day, these large hoarding size 12 by 18 feet of the prints were changed every 15 days. So it went on for almost 2 or 3 months. This is the first, what is my space? This is how it is. And this was executed in German because I wanted people to connect with it, and performed at within the city of Germany along the banks of the Elbe, and the locals would have been able to recognize, just like the people in China or Shanghai would be able to recognize the locations where I was performing. So it was an attempt to kind of immerse myself at sites of where rivers are, and within all rivers that I kind of are lucky to visit and to perform at. What can cover the earth? During a catastrophe, water or environmental catastrophe, water will cover the earth. And that is what we are looking at in terms of immersion or the water level rising and most of coastal cities going under. What is my madness? The madness could be read as the recent cloudbursts and floodings that are unprecedented. What is my thought? What is the thought? I am listening to the St. Nikolai's Creek, which is right under, and there, if you know the history, you would know the history of Hamburg. They're totally decimated, and the only building that was left standing was the St. Nikolai's steeple, which you see in the background. And this St. Nikolai's Creek is the only creek in Hamburg which is not gated, because Hamburg has one of the highest tides, almost up to 3 meters. And this creek is the only one that is left open. It does not have any gates. So it's naturally left open. What is my cause? What is inevitable? Why do I revolt? This is at the mouth of the river at Friedrichskrug. This is outside the nuclear power station, just outside Hamburg. What is my poison? This is out on the almost contaminated beach with the power station in the background that you see. What is my grief? This is at the power station. I was not allowed to enter with the barricades. What is my opposite? And what is the greatest marvel? You can see the Hamburg's Philharmonic Hall in the background. Each day death strikes, and though we live as though we are immortal. What will be my defeat? To Dvaipayana, I took off on another episode in the Mahabharata, and according to the sacred text, the Purana, the sage Parashar reaches Kalindi, the river Yamuna in North Delhi, in North India, and wishes to cross it. He looks around and finds a fisherman's boat. Parashar asks Satyavati, the woman, the fisherman's daughter who's in the boat at the time, to take him across the river, since her father is occupied elsewhere. Satyavati agrees, and while on the boat, the sage cannot take his eyes off her. He makes a request to make love to her. She agrees to his request, and legend has it that the heavens come down and they kind of, to give the couple privacy, the boat is covered with clouds, and it is, I think it's a wonderful miniature that one can look at. She agrees to his request and they conceive a child on the boat. And this I got to know later after I had done the first work, which is the boat making. And the child, the male child born on the island on the Yamuna, is named Krishna Dvaipayan Vyas, the dark one from the island, or Ved Vyas, and he is later comes to be known. Ved Vyas is believed to have compiled the 4 Vedas and the Mahabharata. Dvaipayan is also features as a lake at the end, at the last episode of the Great War in the Mahabharata. The instigator of the war, King Duryodhana, takes refuge in this lake, which in turn covers him in ice. This eases the king's fatigue and sense of loss and wrongdoing. The epic narrates that he can emerge from Dvaipayana only by his own volition. No one can force him out of it. And that is why Bhim and Arjuna and Krishna actually challenge him and he comes out again. In the Mahabharata, King Duryodhana hides within the lake, which is also the creator, author, artist himself. Thus, Dvaipayana becomes the mythical lake from which we may all be and from which we may all derive ourselves. Looking for lost water in Delhi, this is the subtitle of the work. I perform at various locations named after or for water within my home city of Delhi. This is on the bank of the Yamuna. This is at Babarpul on the Sahibi River in West Delhi near Najafgarh. I perform at old wells, step wells, old water bodies which have been covered over to make way for roads or for ease of traffic. Some remain only within the consciousness of and memory of older generation, referring to a water body lost to time and to greed. The body, my body here, plays the indexical of perhaps wanting or attempting to connect to the labyrinths of water tables and sources which keep or kept the city alive, and also to the histories of the land. This is outside the mosque, the old Fort Mosque in Delhi, or the Horse, which had a natural water access. This is at Lal Kuan in Old Delhi, and on the left would be the Aman Committee police station, and in front of me would be the Muslim area, and on the back of me would be the Hindu area. And in the 1977-76 riots in Delhi, this is where the two, it was where it was barricaded. The Muslims could not cross over to the Hindu side. The Hindus could not cross over to the Muslim side. So this is Lal Kuan in Old Delhi. This is the Janta Pyao. It has been Hinduized, as you can see, but it was open to everyone. It is still open to everyone. It is just outside the Old Delhi railway station, one of the oldest pyaos and wells of Delhi. Some of them have gone dry because of the metro underneath, but most of them are still, the water level is still quite high. This is the border of Delhi where the Saibi River comes in and now becomes the Najargarh drain, which is the largest drain of Delhi. This is a natural river, but this is the barrage of that river. But a few 15 kilometers inside from here, that you would, the same river becomes the drain and then falls into the river Yamuna, which has 22 drains falling into it of the 55 kilometers that of the course that it runs through Delhi. This is another site. This is Chapparwala Coup, which would mean the thatched well in Karol Bagh area, where most of the refugees after partition came to stay, and they would tell you the way from this well. You go to the thatched well and walk 1 kilometer north, go to the thatched well and go south for 3 kilometers. All references to anything in Delhi were from this well. The well still exists underneath, but obviously it has been covered over for the road. This is outside Khari Bauli and the gate to the Fatehpuri Mosque. This is where the Khari Bauli means the brackish step well. So the step well is not to be seen anywhere, but it's still called Khari Bauli. So this is me at the water source and close to the house in the Fatehpuri Mosque. How this is, sorry, comes again, sorry. And this is me at the Panchkuya Road, which means the road with 5 wells. It is also about associating locations. Why are they named after something? To look at water. Where are the wells today? Where are the water bodies today? And also looking at history or looking at the labyrinth. Again, listening to the city for history, meaning, and myth through water. This is how it was exhibited. And this is at the Kuala Lumpur Biennale 2017, where the work was exhibited. I would also like to show you, there were 3 works that came out with the work called Andhvapayana. And you see the work called Deliverance, and you see the images of the boat making that were displayed at the gallery. And there was another work which was called From Dvapayana. These are objects that I found on the river with ordinary water from the river displayed as an object in the gallery with other objects that I had found on my travels along the river. But then there was something else that I did was suddenly I had just a whim, another of these whims that I kind of give in all the time, of actually setting the boat that I made on fire. But obviously, since the boat was, and it belonged and was paid for by the museum, so I couldn't set that one on fire. But I bought another boat in Varanasi, in Banaras, and I actually did a video which is called On Dvapayana. And it's a 3-channel video in which a boat crosses the screen filled with sawdust and a bundle of clothes and a suitcase, and then it suddenly catches fire. And this is where I would like to end with Toni Morrison. All water has perfect memory and is forever trying to get back to where it was. And that is why, and also from Wisława Szymborska, whatever has happened is written on the waters of Babel. And climatically, if one looks at it, the amount of fresh water in the world remains the same, or is actually going down with our environmental interventions that man is continuously at. So when I step into the river, Yamuna or any river, it may still have the still molecules, something which all the other generations who stepped into the river of the city may have also touched their feet when the river touches my feet. It is the repository of history, meaning, and myth. And as one would say, and there have been scientists in Japan and Germany who have been working on not the notion, but looking for proofs of water having memory. There are plenty of YouTube videos which they explain how water, even for a nanosecond, remembers the vessel that it has been in. So that comes to my title of the work of You Always Step into the Same River, because when we do, we're not only stepping culturally into the river, but climatically also, it may have the same molecules, the same atoms, the same hydrogen, the same oxygen that would have touched somebody else's feet centuries or even hundreds of years ago. Thank you. I hope I haven't taken too much time.
Thanks so much, Atul. That was very good, explanation of your work and thinking both about the environment and also contemporary social issues and also mythology that you bring together to your work. I may just say to the audience that you can type your questions in the Q&A box. And there are already some questions. So Atul is it okay if you take some questions?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I would love to take questions.
Okay. So there are some technical questions, but I thought I would begin with the one that is from Anuradha Malik Sharma, who asks, what were your feelings when Yamini met Yamuna?
Yeah, but that's a very, very poetic question. What were my feelings when it met? I mean, more than the object going to the museum, that was my triumph, actually. Because for the people who were there at the banks witnessing the event, for them, they had never seen a boat on the Yamuna. In their memories, so I don't know, nobody builds a boat on the Yamuna anymore because you can't really take a boat on it, right? Because there are so many barrages and so many stops and so many bridges, you don't boat on the Yamuna at all. So there is no connection to the river. So for them and for me to have made something which would touch the water and something which was meant for it, it was a greatly exciting time for me. And a very emotional time also, to have done it and to have executed a work, again, like I was not waving, but drowning was done there. And then I put another object on the river, which would kind of float on it. But I knew it would never be there for a longer time. So there were these notions, mixed emotions that were there. I don't know whether I'm answering your question fully, but that is what I felt. It was my triumph to have able to execute this project. And I also thank the curator here for allowing me to take the boat to the river rather than straight to the museum. Yeah.
So the boat has been, when it's in the museum, has the traces of the river in it.
Yeah, it has the water in it. The boat, the roots which were filling the crevices had water soaked in,
Uh-huh.
and then obviously after a while the boats they didn't leak anymore, and it was there for all day. 8 hours we were on the river, and so obviously it would have the molecules left over. I hope that it would have a trace of the river on it, because it had touched the river, because touch seems to be very important.
So there's another question by Neelam Sethi, who says, what does your body in the photographs represent? Sorry if I missed what you might have said about it, but what does it represent for you or for the audience?
For me, it's an abstracted through a body, a dehumanizing shape, because I'm almost headless. There's a violence to it as well. And as people have pointed out, there is an inherent violence. Even in the work, I was not waving but drowning, because some people say we feel suffocated while looking at it. And for me, it's like a head in supplication, a metaphor for defeat, for submission, for confessing that, or admitting guilt. And defeat and guilt are something which kind of reoccur in my work, and I'll also be talking of defeat and guilt in the other talk, where I talk of objects of fictitious togetherness. But this is what I think it is. The work could also be titled, "This is my defeat," that I am unable to do anything. And this question comes up indirectly with a lot of other places and universities that I talk and show this work is, so has there been any change in the river? Has it actually cleaned up a little? Well, the only change that I can see, I don't know, I'm not going to say that art changes the world, I don't think so. But we all try, and we have to ask these questions, and through our work, continuously ask these very difficult questions to people who make policy and people who make decisions, and to actually make people think differently. I hope I've done it through the work. But the thing is that, it's about a certain mourning that goes on. Say, what have we done to ourselves? And that is why the defeat and things. So I don't know whether I'm answering the question rightly, but the thing is that what have we done to ourselves? So I think that is what the mourning figure and the head bowed down would kind of mean.
I mean, it's also because you're living in New Delhi, which has expanded beyond any sense of one's imagination. When I visited Delhi, I was just staggered at the amount of expansion in Gurgaon and so on, right? And to the degree that there is no end to it, and it's expanded in a way that has taken over. Villages, agricultural land, and as your own work, points us to really the invisibility of the river, despite it being, so central to Indian mythology and to kind of life for millennium, actually.
Yeah. And it's quite tragic that this has happened, and despite, and it's very interesting that when I did the Yamuna Walk, and maybe I can show it sometime. In the Yamuna Walk, I walked the length of the river for 5 days. I was not allowed to camp because it's private property. So I would come back and start again and do that. And through that, I kind of witnessed that all Mughal buildings were facing the river. All British buildings were facing the river. All buildings that were done after independence had their backsides to the river. So literally, in Delhi, it was a major urban design blunder, which we can blame Nehru for it. We can blame the architects who made New Delhi for it, that all buildings were facing inside. So when you have your backside to the river, it becomes a dump yard, and that is where you take a dump, sorry to say. But that is what the river became. It became out of sight. And I firmly believe that if it would have remained inside and visible, the city would have had some kind of relationship to it. But the urban designers actually majorly blundered after independence.
Let's take another question by Livia Alexander. And she writes, the water is clearly a central element in forming your practice, but I noticed with interest that it's absent as an actual material in your practice, at least in the work you discuss in your presentation. Curious to learn from you about any possible tension between the two.
Okay. No, see, I have done where I've kind of brought water into the gallery. There, and I haven't shown those works here because of due to lack of time.
You had one work with a plastic, kind of a cube with water.
Yeah. I had a cube with water. It's a glass, a vitrine with water. I also had running water in it. I did another work in 2011 where I had a wash basin and it had continuous running water. But the moment you approached it, it would stop. So it was as if the water did not want the human to touch it, So, so I had a sensor to it. And the water continuously running in a gallery was very disconcerting. Not only that you wanted to go and pee all the time, that's what the gallery owners told me, but the fact is that water running, and because of the scarcity of water in Delhi, right, you would want to shut the tap off. But the moment you approach the tap, the water would shut automatically. So there was water. And then I was fortunate enough to, once I exhibited another work in 2007 with the Art Gallery, and these were the vitrines which were also taken off from the Mahabharata, this thing. So these were vitrines, just like the small one that you saw. These were larger vitrines with objects in it and with water in it. But it was like water naturally flows. Water's nature is it to flow from wherever it flows, from higher to lower ground. But if you put water in a vitrine, you're actually kind of conceptually and physically trying to force it to be within a certain location or site or container to contain water. So I had kind of wanted to do that. I had brought water in. And recently, also at a show at Rutgers where I showed with a lot of other people, with a lot of people who worked on water, I had 10 vitrines of objects inside of them, of how we store water, of whether it's bottles or surahis or other things, other objects that one would store water in an Indian house or an Indian poor house, and those were exhibited in vitrines in water, and that was inside a gallery. So I have been there, and but all the time one can't kind of engage with. I wanted to do a lot of stuff with water, but then obviously there are objections from galleries to not to spoil their walls and to their floors, etc. Just like you don't get permission for certain public projects, even private galleries are very careful of their walls, even though I have very, very supportive galleries so far, but somehow it's been difficult to do those things. Yes.
Another question by Tanvi Siravastava. How did you get to link chapters of Mahabharata with your concept of water? Where did you start from, and what were generally your feelings about this?
Oh, okay. No, I've been finding it here. I would like to kind of because most of my work is political, but as in an interview, Mona Hatoum says that she was asked in an interview that what you regret, and she says, I regret that people don't come back to my work. And that is something we all people face who do political work. That once it is understood, and then people would rather not engage with it, and they carry it. So how can one devise methods for which, so that the work remains in people's minds? So I took the trope of using mythology for that, and also the questions that come up. So most of my work is through the question, not only this episode in the Mahabharata, but otherwise also that have you ever touched the river? Have you ever seen the river? Right? And all of the questions on defeat are also questions, and they are philosophical questions. They can be answered through water or otherwise as well. But I thought using mythology would also help in connections to a wider body of people. And it is not question of intellectualizing it, but actually adding another layer to it so that people would take questions with them, and to kind of, so that it is not something that I would be didactic with, but actually allow the viewer to kind of think about it and to keep the question alive. That was the attempt. So that is why the Mahabharata has been helped me to do that, because usually myths, and in myths, most of the lessons are learned through questions which are posed to the protagonists or to other characters. So I thought that was a good way to kind of do that.
So just to follow up on that, I mean, we also have issues with, I mean, in India, of course, but in other places as well, which have to do with, the larger art world is seen as largely secular, right? And, but of course, in terms of if you want to reach to audiences in places like India, and as well as much of the global South, you also have to be sensitive and alert to the beliefs of, what ordinary people are. So how do you think about your work in that, like in both these contexts,
No, it is, see, the thing is that I also refer to another work which I did called Mushk, in which it was an old Delhi residency where proposed by Gigi Scaria, and me, Gigi being a Christian as a migrant to Delhi, me being the born brought up Punjabi in Delhi, and Himanshu Desai, an artist from Bombay, and Mahmood Farooqi at the time. All four of us stayed in Old Delhi, walled city, for a month without going home. And we were actually asked to produce work there. So I decided to make a mushk, or get a mushk made. Mushk is a sheepskin bag through which water is given to people outside the mosque. Mm-hmm. And me being a Hindu, wanting to get a mushk made, right, that in itself became problematic. Mm-hmm. I bought a goat, right, and because they said, you have to, I wanted to make the first water carrier. So they said, you go to this person, you go to that person. I finally went to a person, and he said, no, I want a halal skin. I said, how can you tell from the skin whether it is halal or not? Right? Well, he said, yes, we can, because this halal, you make the cut from below, so you have more skin on the neck. With a jhatka, you cut from the back, so there's less skin on the back. So I can tell from the skin whether it's halal or jhatka. I said, fine. So he said, I want a halal skin. So initially I thought I would kind of get a halal done and be a voyeur, but then turning the camera onto myself, I asked somebody to teach me how to do a halal, right? So and in the video, which is on my website, one can see a small clip is there, and the work is also there. It's somebody who's teaching me how to do a halal. And I did it, and the point is that my friends who were photographing it all said, well, we know you can't take a life, you can't do this, and we don't. So I said, whether I do it or I don't do it, I want it on camera. Even if I chicken out at the last time, it would be on camera. But fortunately or unfortunately, I was able to do it. I took the life, and that became the work, and the skin from it became the mushk. So this was an intervention from a Hindu into a different world of Islam, or should I say Northern Islam, or a Sunni Islam, or in Delhi, whatever the case may be. So I have done these things. So, and in the sense of also the question here comes about of self-censorship. So self-censorship is worse than being censored by somebody else. So if we are too careful, I think we would self-censor, and that would, for me, it's hugely problematic. So one should continue to do what we are doing, and I have been trying to do what I am doing, and I know I've said a lot of things today which may not be appropriate to some people and everything, but these are my opinions, and I could stand by them. And similarly with this work as well, and with other works that I've done later, even the work, objects of fictitious togetherness, there are certain notions of guilt and defeat that also come into that. So with this thing, if one is too conscious, I also believe that this whole notion of, there is also the notion of being so puritanical and conscious of the other that you self-censor. Mm-hmm. And I am coming back to it. So the thing is that there should be space to say what one wants to say, not antagonizing somebody else, but to make dialogue.
Yeah. So, I mean, as you know, as an artist myself, I agree with you that I think one of the things that I think we need to be taking risks, you know, even at the cost of being, let's say, I mean, not intentionally being, let's say, politically incorrect or something, but simply finding ways to think about addressing, you know, the self and society in kind of more meaningful and engaged ways by finding new languages and new ways of addressing that. So, so that relates actually well to the last question that we'll take today, which is that by Sarah Bancroft, and she says that you have a certain calmness and understated humor, and you also are recognizing grief and mourning. Yet the work points to frustration and the damage done by humans to the environment. Does it not promote anger or frustration and anger in you? Or so the question, I guess, of your own modality and the modality of your work.
I don't know. See, if I don't know how else. I mean, maybe this is who I am. I mean, it's a very simple way to answer. I don't know whether I'm answering this question, Sarah, but and I mean, one is angry, but the thing is that if one goes through the work, I implicate myself in all of the works. I am at the Yamuna. I am at the site. I am the one who's drowning. I am the one who's almost dead. I am the one who's doing this. I am the one who's there facing it. I am the one who's looking at the viewer. So it's not that it's the anger at oneself, it's anger at myself. And it's through myself that the anger comes to the other, right? And because I don't want to hit people on the head and be hierarchical and say, well, you did this or you did that, and I'm equally responsible. So whatever is happening, I'm playing my part and trying also not to kind of change the parts that I play also and do whatever little change I can bring in. But the questions have to be asked with calmness so that we can address them. So if I'm angry about it, then I don't think I'll be able to work. I don't know. So I don't think anger would kind of be part of it. The idea is also to look at a lot of people have also told me, I mean, the notion of this, that my landscapes are too beautiful. My images are too aesthetic. And what I address is just the opposite. Maybe that is a good way to kind of do it. Maybe it makes people stop in front of the image and say, well, it doesn't seem such a bad place. Maybe it's still redeemable. Maybe we can still go back. Maybe we can bring it back to what it was. Mm-hmm. So maybe the image tells us this. So if one was angry, then one would always be addressing and showing these images where things are always going wrong. Things are also going wrong in my images. But there is a certain aesthetic which pushes you to spend more time with the image, also spends more time to question yourself, where am I in all of this? So the idea is to kind of pose it in a way that it kind of lingers longer in the viewer's mind, I guess, and in my mind.
Well, Atul, you've left us with, I think, more questions than answers, frankly, but also a lot to think about. But so we will, but we have another session with you on November 12th. So hopefully, so please join us then, and we can continue our thinking about Atul's work and a conversation with him at that time. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you all for being here. Wonderful session. Thank you, Iftikhar, Daniel, Gloria, and South Asia program.